All right, hello and welcome back to online English class. I hope you guys are doing well. Today we're going to be working on our analysis of Act 1, which is OTN 1. Remember, for these OTNs, you do not need to write these in formal prose. You can just write an informal record of the online lecture, annotating your text as we move through, jotting down what you can, and then returning to the prompts after the lecture and making a few clear interpretive statements that summarize what we have moved through in the lecture. Okay, so a couple announcements that I want to go through before we get started with our actual work on the OTN. For you AP students, you need to continue your progress check work on Unit 7 free response question. The exam is not going to be on May 14th, as I announced yesterday. That was incorrect. It's actually May 13th. Okay, so 1 day difference, not a big deal, but just I want to stay on top of those dates. We need to complete OTN 1, which is this, by Friday, and send me some email confirmation that that is done. And you need to begin your quarter 4 essay, which is actually going to be about some of the pieces of text that we are looking at today. And that quarter 4 essay is going to require you to execute some of the basic principles of that prose close analysis. In other words, looking at how an author, namely Shakespeare here, is using literary devices, using language, using the details of the written text in order to illustrate or characterize or develop certain impressions. Okay? So before we get into our Act 1 analysis, we just need to run through a quick SQ3R for the text under consideration, and then we are going to spend some time analyzing the setting very quickly, and then exploring and unpacking the internality of the characters that are introduced in Act 1, Scene 1 specifically. Okay, we're going to look at Lear, Goneril, Regan, Cordelia, and Kent. All as they are introduced in the first scene specifically of Act 1 more generally. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our SQ3R. All right, so as usual, we want to start by taking a look at who the speaker of the text is. And in a play, obviously, there are multiple speakers. There isn't one narrative voice like there is in a piece of prose, typically. The play is spoken by the characters in the play. So there's no narrative voice that filters our impression or focalizes our impression on certain things. We are meant to do that ourselves as the audience. Okay, we're going to get multiple perspectives that are offered throughout each scene that sort of appear in the plot and develop the conflicts and illustrate the motives of the characters. Okay, the genre and the style of the text that we're looking at is a tragedy. Okay, and this is the first act of that tragedy. Okay, so the title of this is obviously just King Lear Act 1. All right, this is going to act as the exposition of the plot, the introduction of the setting, the characters, and the major conflicts. All right, so where the characters are and what is bringing these characters into conflict and driving the plot forward to its climax. And then falling action and resolution. Okay, so a careful analysis of this introduction is going to help crystallize the thematic impression that is going to be made by the unfolding of this plot. All right, so obviously the question that we are meant to be asking ourselves is very simple. How does Act 1 begin to develop Shakespeare's thematic impressions? Okay, before we actually analyze the text, let's just summarize what happens so we can have just a clear understanding, just a quick review of what actually happened in the text. Okay, so in the beginning of the narrative, King Lear, who is a ruler in pre-Christian Britain around the 8th century. Okay, so this is ancient Britain before it was colonized by the Romans, before it was Christianized, decides to abdicate his throne and to divide it between his daughters according to the extent to which they love him. Cordelia, his youngest daughter, refuses to participate, so she is disinherited. Okay, she says nothing. He says, well, nothing will come from nothing. And she says, well, I can't lie to you and flatter you with things that are not true. And so he says, well, here's your inheritance. It's nothing. All right. Kent, an advisor of the king, speaks out against Lear's decision because he says it's rash. He says that this is a bad idea to give the whole kingdom to both Goneril and Regan, and to disinherit Cordelia. Kent is therefore banished. Okay, so Lear obviously doesn't take kindly to people questioning his authority or his version of reality. All right. So the King of France, who is one of Cordelia's suitors, along with Burgundy, is given the opportunity to marry Cordelia, despite the fact that she has been disinherited, and he takes her anyways. Okay, he decides to marry her. Burgundy can't do it and walks away. All right, Goneril and Regan then divide their father's powers equally with their husbands Albany and Cornwall. Albany is married to Goneril, Cornwall is married to Regan. And Lear proclaims that he will be keeping an army of 100 knights, which is sort of his own little way of maintaining power and authority and expressing that power and authority. All right. So Edmund, meanwhile, in the double plot or the subplot, right, who is the bastard son of a guy named Gloucester, and Gloucester is a friend and peer of Lear. Okay, so he's not also a king, but he's a lord of the territories of Gloucester. So he is Lord Gloucester. Edmund plans to displace his brother Edgar by tricking their father, Gloucester, into thinking that Edgar wants to kill their father and take his power. Okay, so it's like a kind of like a prodigal son issue here, where Edmund is trying to persuade Gloucester that Edgar wants to kill Gloucester so he can take his power more quickly. All right, he manipulates both Gloucester and Edgar into believing that each of the other is after the other's life. Okay, they both trust Edmund, and so they believe him. And he, using that as a tool, sows discord between the two and plans to both get rid of Gloucester and also Edgar, leaving Edmund in control of the territories of Gloucester, despite his bastard birth. All right. After the partition of the kingdom, Goneril just begins to express frustration with her father, who insisted on keeping 100 knights. She instructs her steward to treat him coolly and disrespectfully. Kent then returns to Lear's service despite the fact that he has been banished in disguise. Don't ask me how that might work. In reality, obviously these men have known each other for years, and then Kent shows back up in disguise. You would think that Lear would recognize him, but alas, those rules do not seem to apply in this reality. All right. Goneril rebukes Lear for the overbearing presence of his personal guard, and then Lear leaves to go take shelter with Regan, who he assumes will be more grateful to him. Lear sets out with his buddy, the Fool, okay, a significant character in the play, and sends out Kent in disguise to herald his coming to Regan. All right. So where is the play set? All right. That's the first thing that we're going to discuss here very, very quickly. Where is the play set? Well, it can be summarized as follows. It's set in ancient Britain prior to the colonization of Britain by the Romans and the Christianization in the years that followed. Okay, so very much unlike the period of time in which Shakespeare lived, Christianity and Christian premises were not givens in this setting. So references to deities like Hecate, all right, and Apollo, who are both Greek deities, if you remember your Greek mythology, though obviously historically inaccurate, right? The ancient British people did not worship the Greek Mediterranean gods. Just simply a tool, and Shakespeare knew that, okay? It's just simply a tool on Shakespeare's behalf to introduce the fact that the characters in this play live in a pagan culture. Okay, they do not live in a Christian culture. This suggests that very much like modern culture today, this is a sort of unchristian or non-Christianized environment in which the characters live apart from the special revelation of God, but still have the law of God written on their hearts, theologically speaking. Okay, so that is the Pauline language there. The law of God is written on the hearts of the image bearer of God and can be obeyed, though imperfectly, or can be completely ignored. Part of what the play is going to dramatize is the process of these characters either following or completely disregarding these laws of God, these duties that human beings know that they have, regardless of whether or not they know where those duties come from, all right, which is a tragic kind of lack of knowledge, even as the characters attempt to do what is right without knowing exactly why, all right? So let's go ahead and begin our analysis of the characters in the play. We're going to look specifically, as I already said, at Act 1, Scene 1, and we're going to start with our protagonist, Lear, okay? So Lear in Act 1, Scene 1 begins the narrative by abdicating his throne, okay? So just to cut to the chase here, this is something that is an expression of Lear's one side of Lear's heart, and Lear is obviously a complex character, so there are multiple sides, multiple motivations at work here. One of those motives seem to be to do what is best for his kingdom, to be a good king, all right? And according to his understanding of that which would be best for him to do, it would seem that he has figured out or decided that it is time for him to give his kingdom away to younger strengths, while he, unburdened or freed from these sort of concerns, while he retired, crawls toward death. All right, so on the one hand, it would seem that Lear is behaving in a way that is very obviously sacrificial, right? He's giving away his power. He's laying down his authority. Very unlike many kings all throughout world history, very unlike kings all throughout world history who clutched their power until the moment that they died, sowing all kinds of discord and chaos for those that followed after them. Okay, if you read ancient and medieval and early modern history, you'll find story after story of kings clutching to their power much, much too long, and that's leading to discord and disunity in the kingdoms that they were tasked with governing justly. Right? So here Lear seems to be doing the right thing. In a word, he seems to be being a good king. But all right, his motives are kind of clouded or made more complex by the manner in which he partitions the kingdom. Okay, illustrating a kind of dissonance in Lear, that exists from the beginning, and significantly that he does not recognize. Okay, so the internality of the character, Shakespeare begins to introduce to us, as he does all things in the play, through the details of the language. All right, first of all, notice the fact that emphatically all throughout Lear's dialogue in the first act and the first scene specifically, he refers to himself with what is called the royal we. All right, when he's saying we here, he actually means me, King Lear. But he uses what is called the royal we, indicating that he is conflating his opinions, his oppression, his impressions, and his decisions with him and God. All right, that's what is meant by we. Okay, we, me, and the God who put me in control here, or the gods that put me in control here, are going to do X, Y, and Z. All right, it's a way of affirming his sovereignty and his connection to the gods. All right, that are the kind of justification of his rule and authority. Okay, so he says that we are going to express our, quote, darker purpose. Now, literally, what darker purpose refers to here is the hidden purpose that he has not yet explained, right? So it's dark, it's a mystery. But this language, this sort of nuanced connotation of the word darker here, also suggests that perhaps Lear views this process of abdication as something less than awesome, as something that he does not really actually, in his heart of hearts, want to do. Okay, this impression is solidified for us as we move forward in the text in three our kingdom. So we're going to separate our kingdom into three, and it's our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age. Okay, so he's sort of trying to embrace his aging with humility, all right, his mortality with humility, conferring them on younger strengths, okay, with people who are younger than him, more capable than him, stronger than him, while we, unburdened, which is a word that means like free, okay, so this has kind of a positive connotation. Crawl, that's a word that definitely is dehumanizing or has negative connotations. So these two words, right, one with positive connotations, sort of unburdened or free, retired, crawl, all right, a word that is sort of dehumanizing, something that an animal does, something that one does on their belly, right, something that's disempowering position, or a baby does, right, toward death. His ambivalence, his sort of split motives here are manifested even in his language. All right, so this impression is continued as we move forward in the scene. Right, Lear introduces the way that he is going to partition the kingdom. He is going to host a kind of rhetorical challenge in which he is going to give away the kingdom according to the extent to which his daughters are able to articulate their love for him. All right, the way that he describes this, listen carefully to this, is I'm going to give these territories to the which of you shall we say that loves us most, all right, that we, our largest bounty, may extend where nature doth with merit challenge. In other words, I'm going to give the portions of my kingdom to the person with the best nature who merits their rule the most. All right, now this is really interesting because this reveals the way that Lear views himself as a king, all right, and also views kind of reality in general. All right, it would be like if I were trying to pick a successor to teach my class, all right, which is a far cry from a kingdom, okay. But if obviously the reasonable way of choosing a successor, all right, of hiring someone to teach my classes in my stead because I got too old and feeble to do it, all right, it's obviously something that I care about, and I would want someone who had the right kind of merit to take that position. But instead of actually evaluating their knowledge of literature or their understanding of Christian theology and how it intersects with teaching literature and English and all of these other things that would actually merit a person to take the position, I just said, I want you to articulate how much you love me. And that is who I will decide who merits the most of my power. Now, obviously, what this indicates about Lear is that he associates or conflates a meretricious ruler with a person who loves him. He associates his daughter's merit with the extent to which they unequivocally devote themselves to loving their father. Right? This means that he views himself not only as an excellent ruler, an unimpeachable ruler, okay, because obviously for a person who is for the ruler who has the most merit, all they need to do to prove that they have that merit is prove that they love their dad, love Lear. All right. It also indicates that Lear sort of views reality or truth as something that is his to manipulate. These are clearly not the same things, but they are because Lear says they are, and Lear's in power. And so what Lear says is true. Okay, Lear kind of lives in a post-truth environment in which the person with the most power gets to say what is real. Okay? Goneril recognizes that reality and understands that that is what her dad is looking for, which is reflected in the way that she speaks to him. I love you more than word can wield the matter. That's denotatively not true. All right? If you love someone, all you need to do is say, I love you. The word wields the matter. Okay, so this is obviously hyperbolic, dearer than eyesight, space, and liberty, beyond what can be valued, rich or rare, no less than life, with grace, health, beauty, honor. Okay, I love you, Dad, as much as I love the good life, as much as I love anything that can be valued, as much as my own eyesight, freedom, okay, or property. A love that makes breath poor and speech unable, beyond all manner of such I love you. Okay? Here, Goneril's articulation of her love for her father reflects, okay, number one, that she does not value truth. She recognizes that her audience doesn't either. And therefore, she is willing to say things that are not true, yet ironically, tell him how much she values him above all material things in order to get, guess what? Material things. Goneril's value system is therefore subordinate, okay, to the thing that is most materially expedient to her. She is not an idealist. She has no sense of what love actually means, just as she has no sense in the meaning of the words that she is using. She has no sense that using them honestly is something that is inherently good and therefore worth doing even when it doesn't pay her, right? Lear's reaction to this is to reward her, okay? Lear's reaction to being flattered, okay, is to reward his daughter with power. This is ironic because Goneril, recognizing that ultimately what Lear wants, even in his abdication, is an affirmation of his unquestioned control of his daughter's hearts and minds, indicating that Lear's abdication is not authentic. He's not actually giving away his power, he's actually performing it yet again. All right? Hence, Goneril's recognition of this situation and then complete and utter or articulation of a complete and utter unquestioned devotion to her father. Regan does the same thing, indicating that she shares her sister Goneril's materialistic worldview and value system, except for she outstretches Goneril. She lies even more than Goneril. She says that she herself is an enemy to all other joys besides loving her dad, which is crazy. Okay, she's a married woman who is an adult. Obviously, she takes joy in things other than the affection of her father. That is silly. It's clearly hyperbolic, and once again, Lear rewards Regan's dishonesty and hyperbole. Right? Lear uh, fancies himself, right, worthy of such affection, fancies himself worthy of such unrealistic, hyperbolic kinds of love and submission. All right. So once again, even as Lear is abdicating his throne, which is a good thing, even as Lear is attempting to humble himself, sacrifice his power, he is simultaneously grasping for affirmations of it. Okay? Interesting. And he rewards those that affirm it, even if those affirmations are not true. All right. Okay. Next comes Cordelia. And Cordelia, very sort of predictably, juxtaposes her sister's responses. Notice what Cordelia says. Cordelia says, nothing. Lear, nothing? Cordelia, nothing. Lear, nothing will come of nothing. Speak again. Cordelia, unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more, no less. Now, what seems to Lear like coldness, and ingratitude is actually an accurate statement of not only of Cordelia's love for Lear, but also her idealistic understanding of that which she is bound to. She says, I love you according to my bond. What is their bond? She is his daughter. In other words, she loves him in all the ways a daughter ought to love her father, not hyperbolically, like her sisters articulate, but rather according to her duty. Okay? She loves her father according to her bond. No more, which would be hyperbolic and also unnecessary or imbalanced, and no less, which would be immoral. She would be dishonoring her father in that sense. Okay? Lear, unwisely, okay, lacking the knowledge of what Cordelia is actually saying here. How now? How, Cordelia? Mend your speech a little, right? Say something a little bit different, lest you may mar your fortunes. Cordelia, good my lord, you have begot me, bred me, loved me. I return those duties back as are right fit. I obey you. I love you. I honor you. Why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all? Haply, when I shall wed, that lord whose hand must take my plight shall carry half my love with him, half my care and duty. Sure, I shall never marry like my sisters, to love my father all. In other words, right, Cordelia's love for her father is simply a reflection of her understanding of her duties and also of her affirmation of her autonomy of affection. Okay? She says, when I get married to another man, obviously I'm going to love and serve that man, that individual as well. All right? He's going to take half my duties with him. So Cordelia's articulation of her autonomy, the fact that she is free, even as she is duty bound, right? But she is not duty bound to complete and utter submission to Lear, the man, but rather to the ideals or moral principles that structure and order her relationships. In other words, she is idealistic as opposed to Goneril and Reagan, who are materialistic. Okay? Cordelia's value system is both logical, free, autonomous, not in the sense that she is free to do whatever she wants, because it is obviously much more expedient for Cordelia's well-being for her to lie. It might even be better for the kingdom, that we'll find out, if Cordelia had lied. The benefits, the consequences of Cordelia's actions, however, do not ultimately control what Cordelia does. Cordelia's actions are ultimately controlled by her bonds, by what she is compelled to do, by what is right to do. Okay? So, all right, Cordelia is not simply a consequentialist, just thinking about what the consequences of her actions are and how she can achieve the most pleasure or power or benefits for herself. She rather is idealistically committed to doing that which is right. Okay? Lear idiotically doesn't understand that that's what's happening. But goes thy heart with this? Yes, my good Lord. So young and so untender, so young, my Lord, and true. Okay? So young, my Lord, and true. Lear's response to this here, okay, we won't, for the sake of time, we won't analyze every word of it, is to curse her. All right? And he says that your actions are essentially unnatural. Okay? They defy the cosmic order. That's because Lear believes, again, a reflection, that Lear is at the center of the cosmic order, right? In Lear's universe, he is in control of it. Which is a perfectly rational thought for him, because he's never known what it's like not to be in control of the situations around him and the people around him. Okay. So once again, Lear, even as he attempts to abdicate his throne, is affirming and dramatizing or witnessing or bearing witness to his belief in his own omnipotence. All right. Now, to sort of affirm this very quickly, we see Kent, who, like Cordelia, intervenes and calls Lear's power or Lear's way into question. And Lear just says, "Shut up." And Kent says, "No, I'd rather die," right? He says, "The bow is bent and drawn, make from the shaft." In other words, I'm angry. I've got my bow is drawn and I am aiming it at the heart. My wrath is aimed at Cordelia. Get out of the way of the arrow. And he says, "Nope, I'd rather that fork invade the region of my heart. I'd rather die, all right, than not tell you what is true, not be plain with you. I am not afraid of the consequences of me doing that which is right. All right, I am not afraid of speaking that which is true, even though your understanding of truth or reality is at odds with mine and also at odds with reality." This leads to Kent, very much like Cordelia, suffering, all right, even as Goneril and Regan are blessed. Right, this impression is once again the sort of juxtaposition between these two kinds of people is drawn even more tightly in the scene in which Burgundy is faced with a choice to marry the disinherited Cordelia, who he's been courting very hotly, right? And Burgundy kind of equivocates and then says, "Well, I don't think I can marry her if she's not going to come with a bunch of lands and riches and power." And France, on the other hand, says, "You are better than a bunch of lands and money because you are virtuous." Okay? "Love is not love," he says, "when it's mingled with regards that stand aloof from the entire point." In other words, you either love a person or you do not. You do not calculate that decision according to material kinds of concerns, like how much land she comes with. Burgundy, very much like Goneril and Regan, simply cannot embrace such idealistic forms of ethical reasoning, and he walks away. Okay, France and Cordelia then get married. All right, so that sort of ends Act 1, Scene 1, but sort of in my last minute here, I want to point out a kind of thematic tension that is very clearly drawn in the play through Lear's interactions with these two different groups of people, looking specifically at Goneril and Regan and Cordelia. Okay, so there are two kinds of people, right? One, the moral idealist, those who follow the law that is written on their heart, those that pursue honesty and do that which is loving and experience duty as something that they do unequivocally because it is right. All right, those individuals are like Cordelia and Kent. They're not perfect, and their actions their moral reasoning takes place in a broken world where the consequences of them doing right often leads to suffering and hardship, but they do it because it's right. And on the other hand, Goneril and Regan. Okay, and Goneril and Regan obviously operate according to materialistic premises. They do that which will lead to the most beneficial consequences for themselves. All right. Now, the other obvious major character here is Lear. Lear, the protagonist of the play, is characterized as not knowing himself, ambivalent, all right, being sort of caught between wanting to be a good king and wanting to maintain his power forever, perpetually, a kind of aging individual who is being confronted with the fact that his understanding of reality, his understanding of the way the world works, is perhaps not an accurate reflection of the way that that world works. All right. As we continue to analyze Act 1 tomorrow, we'll see these themes and trends be solidified. All right. Have a great day.